I'm Janet Kitlaus. I'm issue specialist for criminal justice and juvenile justice. And by the way, if you attended the plenary, the League is following House Bill 39, which restores the right to vote to those in prison. This session is titled Transforming Juvenile Justice, Good Outcomes for All, with Illinois leading the way. Our speakers are Heidi Mueller, Director of the Illinois Department of Juvenile Justice, and Betsy Clarke, founder of Juvenile Justice Initiative. Heidi was named the Director of the Illinois Department of Juvenile Justice in December of 2016. As Director, she oversees the care, custody, and services provided to youth committed to the department by Illinois courts. In this role, Director Mueller oversees 5 secure youth centers and 8 aftercare offices, along with 5 day reporting centers located throughout the state. Along with Governor J.P. Pritzker and Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton, she's leading Illinois' 21st century juvenile justice transformation plan to reimagine juvenile justice in Illinois over the next 4 years. You can find her full bio at the Issues Briefing section of the State League website. Please be muted at all times. If you have questions, raise your hand and leave your hand up. We will call upon you after our second speaker. Heidi, welcome.
Thank you so much, Janet, and thanks to all of you for having me here today. I'm really excited to share information with you about the Illinois Department of Juvenile Justice and about our plan for transformation. I am going to share my screen so that I can share. Oh, I guess I can't do that. I have a slideshow. I'm not sure if it will be shared because I'm not, share screen is not enabled for me.
Sue, can you enable that?
Try that again, Heidi.
Okay, thank you. There we go. All right. Hopefully everybody can see that. So like Janet said, my name's Heidi Mueller. I'm the director of the Illinois Department of Juvenile Justice. I've been in the role since December of 2016, which means, and I've been at DJJ since April of 2014, which means that I've worked under the Quinn administration, the Rauner administration, and the Pritzker administration, going from a Democratic governor to a Republican governor to a Democratic governor again. That's a fairly rare experience in state government, and you know, it gives me a really unique perspective. Let me see. All right, here we go. Okay, so I want to start with giving you a little bit of a background of DJJ and kind of where it was when I first came in, where it is today, and why we have pushed forward this vision for transformation. So the mission of DJJ is to build youth skills and strengthen families, and our goal in doing that is to promote community safety and positive youth outcomes. The youth that we house at DJJ are kids who have been committed to state custody through juvenile court proceedings. That is the majority of the kids that we house. There's a small number of kids who are convicted as adults in criminal court who are under the age of 18, so they've been transferred to adult court at a young age. And if they are under 18 when sentenced, they begin serving their sentence with us as well. That's about, at this point, 25% of our total youth population. We house kids who are between the ages of 13 and 21. So youth cannot come to us unless they are at least 13 years old. And we are authorized to hold kids until their 21st birthday. Most of the kids who are committed to DJJ are committed in juvenile court. juvenile court gives them an indeterminate sentence up until the age of 21. So state law actually gives DJJ the authority to determine when youth are ready to be released. We actually were not always in existence. DJJ was not a standalone agency until 2006. And the other speaker who's speaking with you today, Betsy Clarke, is one of the people who was instrumental in actually creating the Department of Juvenile Justice. We were formerly part of the Department of Corrections. And then in 2006, statute created DJJ as an independent agency. The rationale for that was, really recognizing the growing body of evidence that demonstrates that youth are physically, emotionally, and cognitively different from adults and should be treated in a developmentally appropriate manner. Now, I say that was a growing body of scientific research and evidence, but it's really common sense for anyone who has raised children that we know that kids are different from adults. They need different things. They experience life differently. And that is part of the reason why people like Betsy Clarke helped create the Department of Juvenile Justice as a standalone agency. Unfortunately, part of the reason why this had to be done is because kids were being treated so poorly in the adult system that it was becoming a crisis. So prior to 2006, when DJJ split off from DOC, there were hundreds of kids every year who were having to be hospitalized for self-harm. Kids were spending, months, extended period of time in isolated confinement. Kids were not getting educated. It was, really, really poor treatment. And unfortunately, in 2006, although the statute created DJJ as a standalone agency, the agency wasn't funded appropriately. The agency began with just a director and an executive assistant, and all of the staff who continued to staff DJJ were DOC staff. They basically were DOC staff on a adult correction staff on a Friday, and on a Monday, they were juvenile justice staff. So the process of sort of changing the culture, training everyone, helping all of the employees understand what is developmentally appropriate for young people was a long process, and the department really was not able to realize that vision. So in 2012, the ACLU sued IDJJ, alleging that the conditions and services in the department violated the due process clause of the 14th Amendment and the Individuals with Disabilities Act. The DJJ acknowledged its failures and immediately settled this lawsuit. And there were really three areas where the ACLU outlined that DJJ was failing. The three areas actually encompass everything we do, but it was primarily mental health, education, and then the conditions of care for youth in our custody. DJJ signed, we negotiated with the ACLU and signed a remedial plan on April 19th, 2014. And I started working at DJJ on April 21st of 2014. So essentially that remedial plan became my job description to sort of fix all of these problems within the department. We are overseen in this process, in this consent decree process, by independent monitors that are appointed by our federal judge. And we, through this process, we were required to fix everything from policy to practice to staffing, hiring. We have to maintain particular ratios. Really everything from soup to nuts, essentially, that we do at DJJ was covered by this consent decree. We're really proud to say that as of December 2022, we at DJJ have achieved substantial compliance with the consent decree across all areas relating to mental health and safety and welfare of our young people. And we are anticipating that we will reach 100% substantial compliance across all the remedial plan areas, including the last few remaining staffing requirements for education in 2023. And we will be able to successfully exit the consent decree. And more importantly, we feel proud that the kids in DJJ now receive much better care. They receive much better education and services. And we have significantly decreased the incidence of harm that kids are experiencing in our custody. All of this work actually, and I will get to it in a minute, has led to DJJ being considered one of the leaders in the field of juvenile justice around the country. And in 2021, and then again in 2022, DJJ was designated as a national promising practices site. What that means is that a group of thought leaders in the field of juvenile justice, they visited our sites and they designated DJJ as a model, as a department, as an agency that other states should emulate in the treatment of juvenile justice. And that was really based on our success in really eliminating the use of solitary confinement, in really embedding a relational, developmentally appropriate positive youth development approach in our work, and really prioritizing mental health and education for our kids. So today, and there's a lot of reasons why we were able to do this. Part of it, as I will talk to you about now, is that today we have far fewer kids in custody than we did when I came into DJJ, and certainly than we did during our peak. So in 2022, we had 145 youth in secure custody and 183 youth monitored and supported on aftercare, which is, our version of juvenile parole, in communities throughout the state. That is more than 90% decrease from our peak. In, I believe, 1999, we hit the peak population at DJJ. We had almost 2,200 kids in secure custody. And when I came on in 2014, we had about 850 young people being held in secure custody and about 1,600 kids being supervised in the community on aftercare. So you can see this very significant population decline at DJJ. That's been due to a lot of factors. Again, I have to give credit to Betsy Clarke and people like her who advocated for statutory reforms that helped us right-size the department, keep more kids from coming in, but especially reforms that allow DJJ to have more control over release of youth so that we could actually manage our population and make sure that we were not keeping any kids in secure custody who didn't need to be there. Today, the average age of kids in DJJ is about 17.2 years. That's in secure custody. The average age of youth who we are supervising in the community is 18.4. And we have an average length of stay in secure custody of 5.7 months. The average overall time that young people spend in the custody of DJJ, including both secure custody and time being supervised on aftercare, is about it's roughly about 18 months. Janet mentioned we have 5 secure youth centers. They're located throughout the state. IYC Chicago, IYC St. Charles, and IYC Warrenville are all located at the very top of the state in the Chicagoland area. IYC Harrisburg and IYC Pere Marquette are located at the very bottom of the state. Pere Marquette is near East St. Louis, and Harrisburg is actually close to the border of Kentucky in the far southeastern corner of the state. Whoops. Okay, something's going. I'm not sure if you can see. Can you hold on a second? Okay. something's going on with the tech, so I'm not sure if you can see my slides anymore.
Heidi, we can see your slides. We
Okay,
just
great.
can't see you.
Okay, great. Okay, so we actually, as I mentioned, because of the decrease in the number of youth by 94% since 1999, we have been able to close several of our secure custody youth centers. There are 5 remaining. However, as I mentioned, they are located at opposite ends of the state. Today, the majority of the kids who are committed to DJJ come from Central Illinois, and so there is no location for them that is located close to their homes and communities. We also have several aftercare offices and residential placements. Our aftercare offices, you can see here, are located throughout the state. We do have aftercare offices in sort of all of the regions of the state, and those are the places that house our aftercare specialists. They are case managers. They adopt a positive youth development approach, and they provide services, supports, and supervision for kids who are in the community, who are finishing their term of commitment to DJJ. We also run several day reporting centers, which are meant to be kind of one-stop shops that provide supervision, services, education, supports for our kids who are in the community who are maybe struggling and need a little bit more structure to get them back on the right path. And then we also have several partners in the community that we work with to provide residential placement. We do have the authority now to place kids in a residential therapeutic placement for the duration of their secure custody or their commitment to DJJ. We call that an authorized absence. And so we partner with organizations like Maryville, Arrowhead, One Hope United, Indian Oaks, Onarga, to provide specialized treatment for kids who need, specific types of treatment, who have really specific and significant trauma histories, or perhaps for girls who are pregnant or parenting who need a safe place to be able to be with their baby when the baby's born, rather than being incarcerated and separated. So I said I wanted to make sure I get to the transformation plan. And I want to make sure I'm being mindful of time, but I do want to sort of note, because it's important, for all of the things that DJJ has done, and for all of our successes, and for all of the ways that we are leading sort of the nation in terms of care of youth in custody, Illinois is still lagging behind other states, far behind the rest of the country, in the way that we think about addressing kids, youthful offenders, addressing kids who have come into conflict with the law. We are still really tethered to a very punitive, outdated adult approach. And when Governor Pritzker was elected, the team at DJJ sat down with him and really sort of laid this out as a crisis. Not only a crisis in terms of the fact that we have way more prison capacity than we need for a population of 145 youth, but also the fact that we are still tethered to an adult corrections model that creates harm, that does nothing to rehabilitate kids, and that was actually designed to oppress. Because of that, DJJ, along with the governor and lieutenant governor, in partnership with the Justice, Equity, and Opportunity Initiative, came forward with what we called the 21st Century Illinois Transformation Plan. And the goal of this plan is to really transform and rethink how we respond to kids who have been committed to the department. And the hope is that as DJJ leads this transformation, we can help lift other entities like juvenile detention centers, juvenile courts, probation departments with us, and help create and sustain some sea change in the way that we look at kids who need our help. The main tenets of our transformation plan are really based on a commitment to reduce the harm of incarceration. And those are the kind of 3 main principles: are divesting from this outdated racist, harmful adult prison model. Instead, creating a restorative, close to home model where kids can live in conditions that are developmentally appropriate and with dignity and humanity, and conditions that are trauma informed and therapeutic as opposed to conditions that exacerbate trauma. We also want kids to be close to their homes and families, and we want them to be able to be integrated with their communities so that we can really build the positive community support that they need to be successful as they transition home. Now, the close to home model is something that states like Missouri have been doing for many, many years successfully. And Illinois lags behind some of these other states in sort of moving the Department of Juvenile Justice to this model. But even more important than housing kids in secure custody, from our perspective, is really building a continuum of care in the communities that kids come from to ensure that those communities can support their own youth. So you can see here, I'm not going to go through all of this because we don't have time, but we really kind of have some major core strategies and frameworks as part of our transformation. We want to support really individualized care for young people. There's a lot of evidence, we know that our kids are not a monolith. Our kids are all different, just like all of our own families and children are different. And we want to make sure that every young person coming into contact with DJJ has an opportunity to grow and thrive, and gets sort of the individualized support that they need. Part of individualizing and making sure that we have responsive care is to replace our large kind of outdated prison facilities with alternative placements, including repurposing existing property to make it smaller, more home-like, just a safer and more rehabilitative space for kids to live in. We also want to reform our supervision, rehabilitation, and treatment practices to align everything we do with evidence about what is best for young people, and to make sure that we're giving voice to the kids in our custody and care, making sure we're listening to them, listening to their families, and empowering them to be able to grow and thrive. Finally, we really want to reinvest in communities, especially those communities that have been most impacted by the juvenile justice system. So by investing in a close to home model and investing in the wraparound community supports that we have seen be most successful with our young people in those communities, we are actually really reinvesting our dollars where they have been, disinvested for years and years, and where communities most need them. I just want to give you here a little bit of an example about how a reimagined DJJ will work in our minds, with respect to the transformation plan. The idea is that we actually, when a youth is committed to DJJ, we begin intake before they even come through the front door. And at that point, we can connect with families, we can connect with probation and courts, and we can put in place the responsive services and supports that are most appropriate for that particular youth and their situation. We want to have, as you can see here, a real continuum of options for kids, because that's what kids need. Kids need different things. And these are really kind of, again, for anyone who's a parent, this is common sense. But for so long, we have been tethered to an approach that really defies logic and common sense. We have put everybody in the same box. We've said that holding someone for long periods of time in an isolated cell, depriving them of sort of basic needs, is somehow going to make them okay. It's somehow going to help them grow into a healthy, safe, and stable adult. That is not common sense, but it is the way that we have operated for many years. And so it is difficult in some cases to sort of get people to wrap their heads around something that we could do that is better. This continuum, as you can see, there's a wide range of options. We want to have everything from sort of educational, employment, and vocational services, all the way up to, for the small number of young people who need to have sort of a secure placement, a very rehabilitative, developmentally appropriate, small home that is located close to their community. The idea for us is that kids can move from more to less intensive placements options throughout their stay, and we want to be moving them to the least restrictive option as quickly as possible. So we have a lot of partners. I mean, this model, we are really proud of it, but of course, DJJ hasn't done this on our own. We haven't come up with this kind of out of the blue. This is based on a lot of research and a lot of partnership with sort of national thought leaders, as well as, local advocates, and looking at our own experience and our own data at DJJ. Some of our reform partners that we currently work with are the Center for Juvenile Justice Reform at Georgetown. We also partner with the Chapin Hall Center for Children at the University of Chicago. We work with the Center for Children's Law and Policy, the University of Cincinnati Corrections Institute, and the Council of Juvenile Justice Administrators. And I actually am appointed as, I'm on the executive board on the Council of Juvenile Justice Administrators. These are just some of the national organizations that we work with. Others include Pew Research, and we work with a lot of Illinois-specific entities, such as the Juvenile Justice Initiative and the Juvenile Justice Project. And as a result of, as I said, all of the work that we've done to bring really the sort of forefront of research and practice in juvenile justice into our work, we've been named a promising practice site. You can see here a picture of some of the folks who have come to visit our sites and to learn from us. We've hosted cohorts from juvenile justice systems in Wisconsin, Oklahoma, Georgia, and Arizona. We're currently mentoring some juvenile justice administrators in Michigan and in Ohio. And we're continuing to sort of help some of the folks in California who are going through their own sort of major juvenile justice reform with the closure of their state juvenile justice system and moving all of the kids in that system to the county level. In addition to all of these national leaders, of course, we could never be successful with helping our kids unless we had strong partnerships with community. And so we wanted to share with you an example of all of the community partners and higher education partners that help support our kids. All of the improvements at DJJ really are because we have been able to connect and partner with the many just awesome community organizations that exist in Illinois that have a heart and a passion for our kids and are willing to come in and bring them enriching programming, everything from art therapy to kinesiology. We have writing programs. We're starting a driver's ed. We have college. We have vocational programming. We have just a huge variety of really rich programming for our kids, and we would not have it unless we were helped along by our community partners. And so we really have to recognize them for all that they do. So I'll wrap up because I know we have to move on to Betsy and to questions, but this is the League of Women Voters. And so I really wanted to highlight that a huge part of the reason DJJ has been able to transform as much as we have already is because of the work of advocates and organizations like the League of Women Voters who support changes to law that help support kids. And I'm going to highlight a couple of the really critical pieces of legislation that have helped DJJ over the past few years, just really since I've been involved. I think Betsy will talk about more things that go back a little further, but Senate Bill 1560, which passed in 2015, was a right-sizing bill. It prohibited commitment of misdemeanors. That was really critical because at the time, kids could be incarcerated for misdemeanors, but adults couldn't. So we were punishing children more harshly than we were punishing adults, which again, as I said, there's no logic to that. There's no common sense there. In addition, this bill set determinate aftercare terms. Previously, kids could remain on aftercare until their 21st birthday. Again, this was resulting in harsher punishment, longer lengths of time being supervised in the community for young people than for adults. And so now kids' terms on aftercare are set in statute and match the length of time that adults might serve. Now, some may say it should be shorter than what an adult would serve. I would probably be a proponent of that, but at least at this point, we're no longer punishing kids more harshly. Senate Bill 2777 granted release authority to DJJ and transferred that release decision-making from an adult prisoner review board to the Department of Juvenile Justice, meaning that the people who have been living with and working with the young people, for the last several months were the ones who were actually determining whether they were ready for release, as opposed to an adult prisoner review board. When this bill passed, Illinois was actually the last state in the country to still be putting kids in front of an adult prison review board. Finally, House Bill 1530, which just passed in 2021, addressed inequities in our habitual and violent juvenile offender statute. That statute was a determinant statute that required kids to serve up until age 21 when they were designated as habitual or violent juvenile offenders. The criteria to be designated as a habitual or violent juvenile offender was very broad. And so what it resulted in is a young person at age 13 could serve more than twice as long of a sentence as a young person who was designated at age 17. Again, there's no logic to that. A 13-year-old should never be punished more harshly if we understand developmental psychology than a 17-year-old, but that is the law that we had on the books. And so House Bill 1530 addressed that by removing the determinant till 2021 language and adjusting the way that sentence is calculated. It also ensured that sentences are served concurrently for young people so that young people are not serving excessively long sentences because the charges are being stacked consecutively instead of concurrently. All of this has really helped us reach the point we are at where the department is much closer to right-sized, where we are not holding kids in custody who shouldn't be or for longer than they should be. But there is a lot further to go. And, as I noted with these statutory changes, Illinois has still lagged behind a lot of our sister states in terms of recognizing kids as kids, in terms of treating them the way that I think our values, our stated values would indicate we should treat them. And so, as part of this talk, I think our call to this group is to really think critically about the laws that we have on the books and that we're passing in Illinois, and raise your voice to protect kids and help us be more successful. And with that, that's my plea. If you have any questions, we are always happy to talk to anybody. And so you see here, we have contact information. Please check us out. We have a great website. You can see all of this information about what we've been doing. We are on Twitter, thanks to our awesome communications director, Dominique Newman. We are on Facebook. We are on LinkedIn. We've always got a lot of stuff going on, and we invite any of you to come visit us at any one of our facilities and get to know our kids. I promise you will fall in love with them. And so I will stop there. I probably have gone on too long. I will stop sharing.
Thank you, Heidi. We have asked people to put their hands up, but because time is short, do put your questions in the chat. Sue or Joy will take a picture of the chat, and I've not asked our presenters, but I would hope that they would be able to answer the individual questions by email later. Now, on to Betsy Clarke. She is the founder, immediate past president, and board treasurer of the Juvenile Justice Initiative, a nonprofit organization devoted to ensuring equality and human rights for all children and young adults in conflict with the law. JJI was instrumental in Illinois' raising the age of juvenile court from 17 to 18, ending automatic adult prosecution for 15-year-olds, requiring lawyers during interrogation for children under the age of 15, reducing detention of children under the age of 13, reducing incarceration of juveniles by 2/3, and closing 3 juvenile prisons. JJI promotes alternatives to incarceration and has been instrumental in the development of Redeploy Illinois, a program of fiscal incentives to counties to create or expand community alternatives in order to reduce juvenile incarceration. Again, Betsy's full bio is in the issues briefing section of the State League's website. Betsy, welcome.
Thank you, and it's an honor to follow Heidi. I don't think we can ever underestimate the impact that Heidi has had on the lives of children in this state. I'm just absolutely in awe of all that she has accomplished, to be down to from over 2,000 to under 200 children in custody, possibly at some points under 100, even after raising the age of juvenile court from 17 to 18, is extraordinary. When the department was first started, as Heidi noted, back in 2006, shortly after it was separated from corrections, conditions were so bad, there were 2 suicides. This was absolutely, well, it was just imperative reform, and it is so difficult to change the vision and the mission and the day-to-day operation of an agency, no matter how large, that it really is extraordinary what she has accomplished, in part due to legislative changes, in large part due to her leadership and vision and collaboration and willingness to be transparent. And also, I would just add to Heidi's list, in large part due to Redeploy Illinois as well, which, as Janet said, shifts financial incentives to counties willing to accept a small, very small amount of government funding in order to develop alternatives rather than committing children to DJJ. We don't have time to go into that right now, but I'm going to just follow up a little bit on some of what Heidi has said and share my screen here. I know that it's confusing. Heidi has done such an enormous job, such an amazing and impactful job of changing justice in the state for children. But her agency only covers children after they are found guilty. It does not cover the initial contact with the justice system, the arrests, the policing. It doesn't cover anything to do with detention, juvenile jails, in effect, holding children pre-trial. It doesn't have anything to do with young adults who are held in adult prisons, and those of us who are parented children 18, 19, 20 years old know that they are not full-grown adults yet. And so, as Heidi said, there's a great deal more to do. And one of the things that continues, can people see this all right? I'm not pulling up the full slide because I'm not going to do all the slides. I'm going to move around a little bit here. But the US does, let's see if I can move this over here, incarcerate more people per capita than virtually any independent democracy on earth. And, you know, just in our adult Department of Corrections, which, as I said, houses young adults, 18, 19 years old, they're still teenagers. Some of them, 18-year-olds could still be in high school. We incarcerate, just in the time that I've been practicing, we've moved from 7,000 up to at one point 50,000, and now I think we're down to about 25,000 in those adult prisons. So we have very high rates of incarceration of children and adults pre-trial in jails and juvenile detention centers, and profound racial disparities in our incarceration rates. Now, nations with lower incarceration rates are generally safer than the US. There's little or no correlation between high rates of violent crime and the rates of incarceration. And the research shows that incarceration just doesn't work for public safety. I want to show this slide. This is really brand new. The Chicago Council on Global Affairs was involved in a world ranking of countries on impunity. In other words, and I don't have a good definition. I've got to get a better definition, but how much government impedes or encourages safety and human rights and development in their nations. So on this world chart, you can see that green is good and red means that you're in a very repressive country without much freedom and without many human rights. The US doesn't fare very well on this chart. It's kind of in the middle here. And one of the reasons the US ranks so low, even though we are a high income, one of the highest income countries, we're hurt because we have very low scores in databases on discrimination, inequality, and democratic access to government, to power. We're hurt in the atlas by the small number of ratified human rights treaties. And obviously that we, especially in terms of human rights, our history of racial discrimination, particularly against Black Americans, is partly a function of the legacy of slavery, the report notes. What does this mean for the US and why is this so important? Well, we haven't ratified 6 of the 9 major human rights instruments in the US. So we haven't ratified the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and we haven't ratified the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. And in terms of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and in terms of children in conflict with the law, this is serious because the convention, which has been ratified by every other nation on earth except the US, sets out aspirations for the way children should be handled when they violate the law. And one is that children should be presumed incapable of criminal intent below a reasonable minimum age that is defined as 14 or higher. They should all be given the right to trial or sentencing in a juvenile court. And I would note, and some of the comments on the convention note, that the first juvenile court was in Chicago in 1899, the first one in the world. Every child under the age of 18 should be tried and sentenced in a juvenile court. And children have the right to deprivation of liberty as a last resort, which is what Heidi has been so brilliantly working towards and putting in place. Deprivation of liberty as a last resort. Now, the Juvenile Justice Initiative has worked with a number of partners, and Illinois, particularly as the home of the world's first juvenile court, has encouraged ratification of the convention. So Chicago and Illinois have urged the Senate to ratify the CRC, and Chicago and Cook County have passed resolutions urging government agencies to be aware of these human rights of children. We work, and I'm going to say this early on, the initiative, as Heidi noted, works to present proposals to the legislature that are consistent with the Convention on the Rights of the Child. One of the things that we've worked on for over a decade is to get young children out of pre-trial detention. Now, You have to be 13 to be sentenced to Heidi's agency after trial, but children as young as 10 can be placed in essentially jails, juvenile detention centers before a trial. There is a bill this year, House Bill 2328 by Majority Leader Robin Gable, which would raise the age of juvenile detention from 10 to 14 and limit detention to a last resort for serious offenses. It is critical, absolutely critical, because Heidi's agency recently inspected juvenile detention centers in Illinois. Only 4 of the 16 met even basic standards, and issues across most of them included excessive use of solitary, inadequate training of staff, lack of education, lack of programming, and lack of mental health care. Really, really troubling reports on the conditions in those juvenile detention centers that are not under Heidi's control. They're under county control and court control and state funding. I should say court control, county and state funding. And then we have House Bill 2128. Jan Goldberg, I think you asked about transfer and how that had impacted Heidi's agency, and certainly ending in 2015, many of the automatic transfers of children to adult court for trial and sentencing has helped a lot to right-size the system, but we still have a bit to go. House Bill 2128 would end the nearly 4-decade practice of denying children under the age of 18 a hearing, just a hearing in the juvenile court on the critical issue of whether to try and sentence in juvenile or adult court. Again, this is a fundamental premise of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, based on what we in Illinois started back in 1899. So this is an initiative of the Illinois State Bar Association, I'm thrilled to say, this year. So I hope you can all get behind that. And House Bill 2347 by Rita Mayfield would raise the minimum age for sentencing to Heidi's agency, IDJJ, from 13 to 14. This is consistent again with the international standards, Convention on the Rights of the Child, all of the research on adolescent development, Heidi's work to right-size her system, and best practice. You can find fact sheets on all these bills on our website, jjustice.org. Go to the issues section on our website. Now, quickly, because we're running out of time, we have felt rather early on with JJI that the US was, because we were not part of this vibrant discussion of how to handle children in conflict with the law through the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and we're outside of this discussion because we haven't ratified the convention, that we should look to other nations for best practices. And so we've been doing that for some time. And let me just see if I can move here. Other nations focus on this minimum age. I have a lot of slides here, so let me go real quickly to outside the US, other nations near us and what they do with minimum age. Okay, Mexico, to the south of us, has a national law. First of all, the US does not have a national law setting forth protections for children other than the Juvenile Justice Delinquency Prevention Act, which only covers separation of children from adults, so minor things like that, but no comprehensive national law in the US. We have 50 state systems for juvenile justice. Most other countries have a national law. Mexico, by national law, no child under 12 can be prosecuted criminally in juvenile court, and no child under 14 can be locked up. This is the only juvenile prison in the Yucatan, where Cancun is, where many of you may have been. The day I visited, it had about 25 children, very few children locked up there. By law, Judges and defense lawyers have to travel to the juvenile prison. There are rooms set aside for private meetings. And I would say this is pretty common that around the world, judges travel to the prisons and see the conditions that children are facing. This is not common practice in Illinois. In fact, in Chicago, the Cook County Juvenile Court, the detention center, pretrial detention of children, is directly above the courtrooms, and the judges do not generally go upstairs ever to see the kids there, even though it's one stairway up. In Mexico as well, prohibition in the national law on the use of solitary as discipline for children. The national law specifies incarceration for the shortest possible time and encourages the use of restorative justice. Puerto Rico, they would like to be a separate country, not quite yet. Last June, they passed a new law, minimum age of 13 for prosecution, prohibits mechanical restraints, solitary, pepper spray, eliminates automatic transfer to adult court, limits judicial transfer to murder and sexual assault cases, but that's after a hearing in the juvenile court. Kids have to have a hearing. And it establishes mediation as an alternative method for resolution of conflict. Canada, to the north of us, since 1984, they have had a minimum age of 12 for over 3 decades for prosecution. Minimum age of 12 in Canada for over 3 decades. And in Illinois, there's no minimum age for prosecution of children. The only thing is this minimum age of 10 for detention and minimum age of 13 to be sent to Heidi's agency. No minimum age for arrest and prosecution in Illinois. Chile has a minimum age of 14 for prosecution of children. This is the outside of a juvenile prison, Tilto, which is about an hour and a half north of Santiago. The day I visited, there were no children under the age of 14 in this prison in Chile. There's certainly issues with the overuse of incarceration in Chile, but they do not lock up young children. And once again, judges are required to visit and meet with the children that they sentence to prison. There's a vigorous ombudsman review of the juvenile prisons, and the judges in Chile are trained on both the Convention on the Rights of the Child, Normative Internacional, as well as Chilean law. The home of the world's first juvenile court, our juvenile judges are not trained in any laws outside of Illinois. They are not trained on the Convention on the Rights of the Child. It's really pretty shocking. Morocco, the State Department at one point sent me to Morocco with a team to educate juvenile judges in Morocco. They have a beautiful training center in the capital in Rabat. There are tennis courts and just beautiful grounds and a lot of female judges. And of course, over lunch, eventually they said, question, why hasn't the US ratified the Convention on the Rights of the Child? We had nothing really. We had only to learn from the juvenile judges in Morocco. They have by law a minimum age of 12 for prosecution. And this has been on the books for a long time. Till reaching 12 years of age, a juvenile shall not be penally held responsible for his deeds, having not reached the discernment capacity. Okay, there are some states in the US that have been shifting to a reasonable minimum age. We're not quite high enough yet. You can see 13, pretty much 14 for incarceration for commitment to a juvenile center like Heidi's in California. So Rita Mayfield's proposal is right in line with what has been the law in California for a couple of years now. Germany is one example, and gee, I've got to hurry here. We've taken teams to Germany to look at the way they treat young adults, because in Germany, young adults, these 18, 19, 20-year-olds, get juvenile sentences because they work better. And this has been true since the 1950s. After World War II, Germany had to rethink its entire policing and prison system, obviously. And they did not base their juvenile code on the US at all. They decided to use, they had too few children, they said, to not try to save all of them. And so juvenile sentences for young adults. The prisons look like ours from the outside. There's barbed wire. Here's the entrance to a young adult prison in the north of Berlin, Neustrelitz, but it's inside that's different. So in the cells inside, people can personalize their space. These are young adults with juvenile sentences, very, very short sentences. And then everything in Germany is about normalization, trying to make sure that people live as normal a life as possible. So regular clothing, not uniforms. And by the way, the prisons that we went to in Germany, adult, juvenile, did not have the awful handcuffs or any of that that is so prevalent in our adult correctional system in the US. Can they prepare their own meals in a fully equipped kitchen? This was what got one of our members of our group who said, wait a minute, there are knives out there. Those are weapons. That's not safe. The German officials say everything is about life must be as normal as possible because you're going back into society. The punishment is simply being removed from your family. Everything else is about normalization. Keeping food in your own lockers, a lot of career training, vigorous career training, and this is huge, when you leave prison in Germany, you may have a certificate for a job, but you have no criminal record. You have paid your dues. You have paid society for the whatever the conduct was that you did. You're done, no criminal record. I can't emphasize that enough. That alone would be so transformative in the US. This particular prison had a big emphasis on art, and we saw that everywhere. This one also remarkably had a farm. And by the way, the person taking these photographs was Marshawn Allen, who had recently been released. He had been locked up since 15. He had spent, I think, 20 years in adult prisons and had recently been released and went on this trip to Germany, walked into the first German prison, which was built around the courtyard, a lot of trees, and said, when I went into prison in Illinois, I never saw another tree. So this really was, it's just transformative. Cafeteria and culinary arts program, but again, a certificate when you leave from this and no, nothing else. I want to just end, because I know we're running out of time, with this slide, and that is, you should know what visitors from outside the US think of our juvenile and young adult justice system. The juvenile judge that I met down in Chile again last August had been through our juvenile detention center in Cook County a decade earlier. He was asked what he remembered of it, and he said it was filled with Black and Latino children. A team of social workers from Berlin that we took through the Cook County jail last fall just walked out just stunned. They said, how can you only lock up Black and brown people? How is this possible? A prosecutor from Argentina went through the juvenile detention center. Again, this is not Heidi's shop. This is pre-trial. This is really unregulated. Our Cook County Juvenile Detention Center, and said, this is an adult jail. This isn't right. And I want to end with this comment. Some years ago, I met two judges and a police officer from Senegal following a visit to Chicago. I explained what we do, and then there was just absolute silence. And I thought maybe lost in translation, jet lag, what was going on, didn't know. finally the police officer spoke up and he said, you have to understand, we didn't think anyone in the US cared about the human rights of children. I'd urge you to please support those 3 bills I mentioned, and also continue to urge the US Senate to ratify the Convention on the Rights of the Child. And thank you.
Thank you, Betsy. I think we've got time for 1 or 2 questions, and I wanted to reiterate, if you put your question in the chat and we don't have time to get to it, the speakers, again, I have not run this by our speakers, but they're a congenial pair, and I'm sure that they would be happy to respond to you later by email. I think I know that Jan Goldberg, if you unmute yourself and show your video, did you have I think 1 question was answered, but do you have others?
Well, my question about the automatic transfer, the bill that is changing that to have a hearing was answered. And I appreciate Betsy answering that part, but I wondered if the numbers have gone down and if the criteria has changed, if she could go over the criteria for how a youth is transferred from juvenile court to adult court, and if those numbers have changed over the years.
Well, those numbers have changed dramatically, Jan. Thank you for that. There was a point when we were automatically transferring, I think, over 200 children a year, mainly in Cook County and on the west side of the city. And these were drug offenses. The automatic drug transfers were huge. Interestingly enough, there is now, next to the juvenile court in Cook County, a marijuana dispensary, ironically. So there you go. Right now, it is down to just 3, and they're tough categories. 16 and 17-year-olds charged with murder, ag crim sexual assault, and aggravated battery with a firearm. The plea in the bill, which again is House Bill 2128, is simply that they have the opportunity for a hearing in the juvenile court. They could be discretionarily, it could be a discretionary hearing that has a list of factors for the juvenile judges to review. It could be presumptive, with a presumption that they should be prosecuted as adults. It could be extended jurisdiction juvenile. We have a lot of ways on the books to be really remarkably punitive for children. And when we started transferring children for murder, for example, 4 decades ago, 20 was the minimum sentence with day-for-day good time. You could be out in 10 years. That's why we have so many leaders in the like Marshawn Allen, who were able to get the day for day and get out, and are leading around the country such wonderful lives, speaking out for better policies for children. Now, of course, the minimum is 40, truth in sentencing, 85% you have to serve. It's an entirely different ballgame. So this was always a failed policy. Always a failed policy. Children just shouldn't be prosecuted as adults, period. I wish we could end it all, but not quite there yet.
Thank you.
So that answered your questions, Jan?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, great. I think Patty Lackman also had questioned. Patty, if you would unmute yourself and start your video.
You know, I sent you, Janet, about 6 of them, so I'm trying to pick the best one out of it.
But we actually have a little more time. I thought we had run out of time. I was looking at the wrong clock. We have a little more time. So go right ahead.
I have 2 questions for Heidi, and I don't know, you said the majority of kids come from Central Illinois, and I want to know why you think that is.
Sure, I can start there. So it used to be, and there's something going on with my video, so I apologize if you can't see me. But it used to be that the largest percentage of kids at DJJ came from Cook County. Yep. I think that Cook County has really done a lot of work to truly use DJJ as a last resort. And frankly, Central Illinois has not been as, I guess, hasn't adopted the same vision and viewpoint. So I think, along with, at this point, the largest percentage of kids coming from Central Illinois, I think in addition to that, the largest number and percentage of kids who are charged as an adult at a young age is coming from Central Illinois. And every single one of those kids is Black. In Cook County is not sending us, they are not charging kids as adults. We rarely get an adult sentence from Cook County anymore.
So I have one real quick question. Out of my 6, do you still require youth supervisors or whatever you're calling them today to go to the training academy upon hire?
Yes.
And what training has been done from the old staff from IDOC days?
That's a great question. There has been a ton of training. That's part of, the challenge of really reforming a system. There is a lot of training, a lot of retraining that has to happen because, the folks in our system, our staff, it's not like they make up the model either. They've been trained, they've been taught. So some of the things that we've done almost right away, we implemented something called the Crisis Prevention Institute, CPI, which is a de-escalation and harm reduction training model that is meant to sort of reduce the use of physical force with young people. And it teaches our staff how to use body language and verbal communication to help de-escalate as a first measure when you're interacting with kids who are escalated. It also teaches when you do have to use hands-on with kids, how to do it in a way that is least harmful. We implemented, we've done youth developmental, adolescent development training. We've trained our staff in cultural responsivity. We are doing trauma-informed care training now, and we will be rolling out something called TBRI, which is trust-based relational interventions. The idea there is that young people really, there's a lot of research that says really up to 50% of any change in behavior is attributable to the relationship that a young person has with the provider of care or support. And trust-based relational intervention really looks at what we know about attachment and relationships to try to help kids feel safe, feel like they are cared about, and utilize that sort of a relationship as the basis to help young people really grow and reach their potential. It also really recognizes the complex trauma that the majority of our kids come into our care with. We've done case management training, we've done motivational interviewing training. Essentially, we came into a system where even our mental health staff had no idea how to do a case plan. No one was doing, a case plan with goals with kids. Kids were just sitting incarcerated. And so we've really had to retrain them from soup to nuts. We've had to teach, these are young people, this is what young people need, and help our staff, move in this direction. I'm happy to share, we have a wonderful chief of training and professional development who is an LCSW and has her PhD. And she is really completely revolutionized training at DJJ.
Oh, thank you, Heidi. Our session has to end shortly. But again, if anyone has a question that has not been answered, please put it in the chat. The speakers, I'm hoping, will agree to respond to you later by email. Great presentations, Heidi and Betsy. Thank you. Of course, the time is always too short. And now Joy will show us the ending slides.